Florida's sun blazed mercilessly over the sprawling skyline of Miami, reflecting off glass towers and private yachts, painting a picture of perfection. But beneath the shimmer of wealth and luxury, some things never fade. Some mistakes linger like shadows, waiting, patient, inevitable. Benjamin Aldridge, a self-made billionaire, strode across the polished marble floors of his penthouse, adjusting the crisp navy suit that had become his armor. He was 38 now, handsome, powerful, and untouchable in the eyes of the world. Yet, there was a quiet hollowness that even the finest luxuries could not fill. Memories from a reckless youth occasionally haunted him. Fleeting faces, forgotten promises, and a small town he had long abandoned. He poured himself a glass of scotch and gazed out at the city. Miami looked eternal from this height, but Benjamin knew that time, like water, could erode even the strongest foundations. And some foundations were built on mistakes too heavy to ignore. Meanwhile, in a quieter part of Florida, Barbara Thompson guided her 17-year-old daughter, Rita, through the maze of her own complicated life. Barbara had once been young, vibrant, and in love, or at least in a fleeting passion that had altered her life forever. Benjamin Aldridge had been that passion. A summer fling, brief and intoxicating, that left Barbara carrying a secret she had protected with every fiber of her being. Rita had grown up without knowing her father, but she had inherited a quiet curiosity, an inquisitive mind, and an uncanny resemblance to the man who had unknowingly shaped her life. Barbara had raised her daughter with honesty where she could and caution where she must. Secrets, she had learned, were powerful. They could shield or destroy. Now Rita was 18, poised at the edge of adulthood, intelligent, ambitious, and determined to carve her own path. Her life had been simple, filled with modest joys and the occasional struggle, but nothing had prepared her for the twist that fate had reserved. She had applied for an internship at a prestigious Miami firm, unaware that stepping through those doors would bring her face to face with a man who would change everything, Benjamin Aldridge. Barbara watched Rita prepare for her first day with a mixture of pride and apprehension. She had always known this day might come, though she had never wanted to confront it. Secrets, no matter how carefully kept, had a way of unraveling when the timing was least convenient. "This is your chance, Rita," Barbara said softly, smoothing her daughter's hair. "Don't let anything or anyone intimidate you. Remember who you are and what you deserve." Rita nodded, her heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. She had no idea that the world she was entering was not just professional, but deeply personal. Across town, Benjamin prepared for a board meeting, unaware that a young woman, carrying both intelligence and innocence in equal measure, was about to cross his path and challenge everything he thought he knew about himself. In the sprawling city of wealth, ambition, and secrets, the past was patient. It waited, and soon it would arrive in the form of a young woman named Rita, a woman who was about to make Benjamin confront the choices he had long buried, and the consequences that had quietly shaped the lives of others. The office lobby of Aldridge Enterprises gleamed with polished glass and steel, every corner whispering of power and success. Rita adjusted her blazer nervously, clutching the folder of documents she had prepared for her first day. She had never worked in a place like this before. Everything screamed wealth, influence, and authority. But she was determined. Her interview had gone smoothly, and now she was officially an intern in one of the most powerful firms in Florida. What she didn't know was that the man she would be reporting to was someone who had once held the potential to alter her entire existence. Benjamin was in his office when his assistant announced a new intern. He barely looked up from the files spread before him, but when Rita stepped into the room, something stirred, a vague familiarity, a strange echo from a past he had long tried to forget. "Rita Thompson?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, sir," she replied, trying not to betray her nervousness. "I'm excited to be here." Benjamin studied her, noting the sharp intelligence in her eyes, the confidence hidden beneath a layer of humility. Something about her felt familiar, though he couldn't place it. It was unsettling. "Very well," he said finally. "You'll be working closely with me. Pay attention, ask questions when necessary, and remember that excellence is expected here." Rita nodded, trying to keep her heartbeat steady. There was something intimidating about Benjamin Aldridge. Not just his presence, but the aura of command that seemed to radiate from him. Yet, There was also an unspoken depth, a hint of something behind the polished exterior that piqued her curiosity. Over the next few days, Rita threw herself into her work, impressing colleagues with her intelligence, dedication, and quick thinking. Benjamin couldn't help but notice. There was a spark in her that reminded him, in the vaguest way, of someone he had known long ago. A fleeting feeling of nostalgia, quickly buried beneath the demands of his empire. Barbara, meanwhile, watched from a distance, aware that her daughter was now walking into a world where secrets could either protect or destroy. She had known this moment would come, but had hoped to delay it for a few more years. Now it was inevitable. One evening, after a particularly grueling day, Benjamin found himself staring at the photograph on his desk. A faded picture of a summer long past, a reminder of mistakes he had buried. His heart tightened as he thought of Barbara, the young woman who had briefly entered his life and left an indelible mark. Then he thought of Rita. Something about her had unsettled him from the first moment. Her determination, her sharp mind, the way she held herself. It was as if a piece of that past had come back to him in the form of a young woman, carrying echoes he couldn't quite decipher. It wasn't until a small, seemingly innocent comment from Rita during a meeting that the pieces began to shift. "I've always been curious about family legacies," she said lightly. "About the people who came before us and the choices they made." Benjamin froze for a moment. The words struck a chord deeper than he cared to admit. He studied her carefully, searching for something. Any sign that could explain the strange familiarity that tugged at his conscience. Barbara, sensing that the time had come, made a decision that night. Secrets, no matter how well guarded, were beginning to unravel. She could no longer wait. Rita needed to know the truth, and Benjamin needed to face it. The next morning, Barbara arrived at Benjamin's estate with Rita in tow. Benjamin was in his office, reviewing contracts, when the door opened without warning. "Benjamin," Barbara said, her voice steady but filled with quiet authority. "We need to talk. Now." Benjamin looked up, startled. His mind raced. Barbara. After all these years. And behind her, a young woman, Rita. Something inside him clicked, a recognition that sent a shiver down his spine. Barbara stepped aside, and Rita took a tentative step forward. "Hello," she said softly, her eyes meeting his. "I think we need to talk too." In that instant, Benjamin realized that the past he had tried to forget had caught up with him. And this time, there would be no escaping the consequences. The room seemed to shrink around them, the air thick with tension, questions, and unspoken truths. Benjamin's pulse quickened, his mind a storm of memories and guilt. He had believed he had left his mistakes behind, but they had never truly left him. They had only waited. And now they were here, in the form of a young woman whose presence demanded answers, accountability, and perhaps redemption. Barbara's gaze was unwavering. "You need to know the truth," she said quietly. "About Rita. About everything." Benjamin swallowed hard, the weight of 18 years pressing down on him. He nodded, knowing that the next few minutes would change everything. His life, his relationships, and the very definition of family as he had known it. And so, the shadows of the past began to emerge, forcing Benjamin to confront choices he thought he had escaped, in a story that was only just beginning. The morning sun spilled across the marble floors of Benjamin Aldridge's estate, brightening the vast halls but failing to lighten the tension in the room. Benjamin sat behind his imposing mahogany desk, his hands clasped together, heart pounding, mind racing. Barbara and Rita stood before him, a storm of anticipation and fear surrounding them. Barbara's eyes, sharp and unwavering, met Benjamin's. She had lived 18 years with this secret, carrying it carefully like a fragile treasure, and a dangerous one at that. Now it was time. The moment she had feared, yet knew was inevitable, had arrived. "Benjamin," Barbara began, her voice calm but firm, "there's something you need to know. Something about Rita. About who she really is." Benjamin's chest tightened. He had suspected, there had always been that nagging feeling, but seeing her here, standing with a poise so reminiscent of someone he once knew, made it impossible to deny. His mind flashed back to a summer 18 years ago, a brief but unforgettable encounter, a youthful mistake he had tried to bury. "What are you talking about?" he asked cautiously, though the suspicion in his own voice betrayed him. Barbara took a deep breath. "Rita is your daughter." For a moment, time seemed to pause. The words hung in the air like a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. Benjamin's eyes widened in disbelief, his mind struggling to comprehend the reality of what she had just said. "No," he whispered, shaking his head. "That's impossible. She can't be." Rita looked at him steadily, her expression a mix of hope, fear, and determination. "I've always wondered about my father," she said softly. "My mother told me almost nothing, but I knew he existed. And now, I think I'm finally meeting him." Benjamin's hands trembled slightly as he leaned back in his chair, trying to steady himself. Memories he had long suppressed rushed forward. Barbara's laugh, the warmth of that summer, the fleeting intimacy that had seemed meaningless at the time. And now, it all had consequences he could no longer ignore. Barbara stepped closer, her voice unwavering. "You left, Benjamin. You never knew, or perhaps you never wanted to know, that I was pregnant. I raised her alone, with everything I had. And now it's time for her to know the truth. She deserves that much." Benjamin ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of guilt pressing down on him like a physical force. I didn't know," he stammered. "I had no idea. If I had, I would have." "You would have done what?" Barbara interrupted sharply, her eyes flashing with hurt. "You would have acted differently? You had your life, your empire, your freedom. I stayed. I raised a child alone, made sacrifices you can't even imagine. And now you're telling me you're sorry?" Benjamin's chest tightened further, and for the first time in years he felt powerless. All his wealth, all his accomplishments, could not undo the past. He looked at Rita, whose gaze was steady but guarded, and felt a strange mix of awe, fear, and longing. Rita's voice broke the tension. "I'm not angry," she said softly, though her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Not yet, but I need to understand who you are, why you weren't there, why it took so long for us to meet." Benjamin swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Rita, I don't have words. I failed you. I wasn't there when I should have been. And for that, I am sorry. I know it doesn't change anything, but I want to try to make up for lost time, if you'll let me." Barbara watched the exchange, her heart a mixture of relief and skepticism. She had always wanted this day to come, but never imagined it would be so raw, so immediate. Her daughter was finally confronting the man who had shaped her life, and Benjamin was forced to face the consequences of choices made in youthful ignorance. Rita hesitated, her emotions a storm beneath the calm exterior. "I want to know you," she said finally. "I want to see who you are, not just the man my mother tells me about, but the man I might call my father. But it won't be easy. Trust doesn't come overnight." Benjamin nodded, a lump forming in his throat. "I understand," he said quietly. "And I'll do whatever it takes. I have to earn it, don't I?" Barbara stepped back, her expression softening. "You will," she said. "But first, we have to be honest with each other. Everything else, the business, the appearances, it doesn't matter if you can't face this truth." As the three of them stood in the expansive office, an uneasy tension lingered. This was not a moment of reconciliation yet, but the first step toward something fragile, something real. Benjamin realized that wealth and power could not fix the mistakes of the past. Only honesty, patience, and dedication could. The days that followed were a delicate dance. Benjamin tried to connect with Rita, learning about her life, her dreams, and her fears. They shared quiet conversations, walks along the estate gardens, and moments that were uncomfortable, honest, and revealing. Rita discovered that Benjamin was not just the distant, powerful figure she had imagined. He was human, fallible, and capable of remorse. She also discovered that Barbara had built a life of resilience and independence, shielding her daughter from the mistakes of others while still imparting strength, intelligence, and moral clarity. One evening, as the sun dipped low over Miami's skyline, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Benjamin and Rita sat on the terrace overlooking the ocean. The air was warm, the breeze soft, and for a brief moment, the world outside seemed to disappear. "I still can't believe this is real," Rita said quietly. "All my life I wondered, and now here you are. I don't know what to feel." Benjamin reached out, his hand hovering uncertainly before resting lightly on hers. "I know," he said softly. "I can't change the past, Rita. But I can promise you this. I will be here now. I will listen, I will support you, and I will never leave you in the dark again." Rita looked at him, searching for sincerity, for truth. And in that moment, she saw it. The honesty in his eyes, the vulnerability he rarely showed the world. It was a start, fragile but real, a bridge across the chasm of years lost. Yet, as they shared this tentative connection, a shadow loomed. Benjamin's empire was not without enemies. Rivals, long aware of the slightest crack in his armor, sensed opportunity. The revelation of Rita's identity, while private and intimate, had the potential to be exploited by those waiting to undermine him. Barbara, ever vigilant, had anticipated this. "We must be careful," she warned. "There are people who will try to turn this against you. Against all of us." Benjamin nodded. "I know, and we'll face them together. But first, I need to prove to Rita that family can mean more than blood and mistakes. That it can mean trust, care, and truth." Rita smiled faintly, a mixture of hope and caution in her expression. She had longed for answers, and now they were here. But the journey ahead, toward forgiveness, understanding, and the rebuilding of a fractured family, would be difficult. And so, the foundation for a new chapter in their lives was laid. One built on honesty, respect, and the fragile beginnings of trust. The past had arrived, uninvited and relentless, but it also offered a chance for healing, if they were brave enough to take it. As night fell over Miami, Benjamin gazed at the city lights, feeling a strange sense of both fear and resolve. The man he had been was gone, replaced by someone willing to confront the consequences of his past. And in the heart of that confrontation, he glimpsed the possibility of redemption, a chance to rebuild not just his family, but himself. The story was far from over. Challenges, temptations, and threats would come, but for the first time in years, Benjamin felt that the mistakes of his youth could perhaps lead to something meaningful. A future where secrets no longer controlled their lives, and where trust could be earned, one step at a time. The sun had barely risen over Miami, casting golden streaks across the city skyline, when Benjamin Aldridge stood on the balcony of his estate, staring out at the ocean. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of revelations, emotional confrontations, and tentative steps toward rebuilding a family he had lost through neglect and absence. Rita sat nearby, sketchbook in hand, her quiet presence a reminder that life could move forward if they were willing to face it honestly. The once intimidating chasm between father and daughter had begun to close, but neither of them underestimated the effort it would take to truly repair the bond. Barbara joined them, her expression calm yet watchful. She had always been the anchor in Rita's life, the steady hand guiding them through the storm of secrets and uncertainty. Now she found herself observing the fragile threads of trust weaving between Benjamin and Rita with cautious hope. "There's no easy way to say this," Barbara began, "but your enemies are circling, Benjamin. The board knows there's a gap in leadership. They've noticed the personal distractions. And there are whispers from competitors that could destabilize your empire if you're not careful." Benjamin's jaw tightened. Wealth had always been both a weapon and a vulnerability. But he had learned that some challenges, like the present one, required more than money or power. They required strategy, courage, and above all, integrity. "I understand," he said quietly, "and I'll handle it. But not at the cost of my family. I've made too many mistakes already. This time, I won't let ambition blind me to what matters." Rita looked up from her sketchbook. "You mean we're going to fight this together?" Benjamin smiled faintly, the tension easing from his shoulders just a little. "Yes, together." The following days were a flurry of action. Benjamin, with Barbara's insight and Rita's fresh perspective, began to anticipate moves from rivals aiming to exploit his recent vulnerabilities. Corporate meetings became battles of strategy, each maneuver designed to protect the empire he had built and the people he now valued most. Rita proved invaluable. Her intelligence, creativity, and determination impressed not only Benjamin but the board as well. Despite being young and inexperienced, she approached challenges with a level-headedness that reminded Benjamin of someone he had long admired, Barbara. It was during one particularly intense board meeting that the first real test came. A competitor attempted to leverage rumors about Benjamin's personal life to destabilize investor confidence. Documents had been leaked, half-truths twisted to appear scandalous. The board looked uneasy, the atmosphere tense, and Benjamin felt the weight of the moment pressing down on him. Rita, sensing the growing tension, spoke up. With all due respect, she said, her voice clear and unwavering, the information being presented is misleading. We have evidence that disproves these claims. If we approach this carefully and transparently, we can turn this around and show that our leadership remains strong. Benjamin's eyes met hers, a mixture of pride and awe welling up inside him. Well said, he murmured, acknowledging her insight silently. He then addressed the board, calmly presenting the evidence and dismantling the competitors' claims piece by piece. By the end of the meeting, confidence had shifted back to their side, and the threat had been neutralized, thanks in large part to Rita's courage and intellect. That evening, the family gathered at the estate. The tension of the past weeks had begun to lift, replaced by a sense of cautious optimism. Benjamin poured glasses of wine for Barbara and himself, while Rita reached for her favorite sparkling water. We did it, Benjamin said quietly, raising his glass. Not just with the company, but with us. We're starting to really be a family. Barbara smiled, her eyes softening. It's a start. But remember, family is more than victories or reconciliations. It's patience, honesty, and the willingness to face the truth, even when it's difficult. Rita raised her glass, clinking it gently against Benjamin's. To honesty, then, and to new beginnings. Benjamin nodded, feeling a warmth he hadn't known in years. To new beginnings, he echoed. In the days that followed, life slowly settled into a new rhythm. Benjamin worked tirelessly to secure his business and protect his family, but he also devoted time to Rita, teaching her not just about corporate strategy, but about integrity, resilience, and life beyond wealth and power. Rita, in turn, learned more about Benjamin as a person, his regrets, his dreams, and the mistakes that had shaped him. Slowly, the walls of resentment and uncertainty crumbled, replaced by a tentative but growing bond. Barbara watched them carefully, knowing that rebuilding trust was a journey, not a destination. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low, Rita approached Benjamin in his office. I think I'm ready, she said, her voice steady. Ready to be more than just the daughter I always imagined. Ready to be your daughter, fully, without fear. Benjamin felt a lump rise in his throat. I've been waiting for this, he said softly, stepping closer. And I promise you, Rita, I'll do everything I can to be the father you deserve. No more mistakes. No more hiding. They embraced, a father and daughter, imperfect but determined. In that moment, Benjamin realized that true wealth was not measured in dollars or assets, but in trust, love, and the courage to face the consequences of the past. As night fell over Miami, the lights of the city shimmered like a constellation of possibilities. Barbara joined them on the balcony, watching the waves crash gently against the shore. You've both grown a lot in a short time, she said. But remember, life will always test you. It's how you respond to those tests that defines who you are. Benjamin looked at her, then at Rita, feeling a profound sense of gratitude. I understand, he said. And I'm ready, for whatever comes next. Rita smiled, a glimmer of hope shining in her eyes. So am I. The city below hummed with life, a reminder that while the past could not be changed, the future was theirs to shape. Together, they had faced the shadows, confronted the consequences of long-buried secrets, and emerged stronger. And though challenges would undoubtedly arise, one truth remained. They were no longer defined by mistakes or missed opportunities, but by the courage to face the truth and build something new together. In the quiet of the night, with the ocean as their witness and the stars above shining like distant promises, Benjamin, Barbara, and Rita understood that redemption was possible, and that the bonds of family, once forged in honesty and trust, could withstand even the heaviest storms. The story of their past was now a foundation, not a prison. And for the first time in many years, the Aldridge family felt truly whole. Months had passed since the storm of revelations had rocked the Aldridge family. Miami's skyline gleamed under the bright sun, much as it always had, but for Benjamin, Barbara, and Rita, the city no longer symbolized only ambition and power. It symbolized second chances. Rita had officially joined Aldridge Enterprises as a full-time strategist, her intelligence and insight now shaping decisions at the highest level. She moved through the office with confidence, no longer the uncertain intern who had first crossed Benjamin's path months ago. She had earned her place, not just as an employee, but as a member of a family who had once seemed impossible to reach. Benjamin, meanwhile, had become more than a billionaire CEO. He had become a father. His wealth, influence, and carefully constructed empire still defined him in the world's eyes. But at home, it was love, honesty, and patience that defined him. The mistakes of his youth had left scars, but he carried them as reminders to never take family for granted again. Barbara watched the two of them interact, laughing over a shared joke, debating strategies, and sometimes bickering like any father and daughter would. Her heart swelled with relief and pride. She had protected her daughter for 18 years, and now she could finally step back and let Rita navigate the world, supported by both her mother's wisdom and her father's guidance. One evening, the three of them gathered on the balcony of Benjamin's estate. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, waves glimmering under the golden light of sunset. A sense of calm settled over them, a rarity in lives that had once been dominated by secrets, fear, and ambition. Benjamin raised a glass of wine, while Rita held her sparkling water, and Barbara simply smiled, content in the quiet. "To us," Benjamin said, his voice steady and full of emotion. "To family, to second chances, and to facing the future together." Rita clinked her glass against his. "To honesty and to never hiding the truth again," she said, a grin tugging at her lips. Barbara joined in, her gaze soft but knowing. "To love, resilience, and the strength to forgive," she added. For the first time in many years, Benjamin felt the weight of the past lift slightly from his shoulders. The mistakes, the secrets, and the long years of absence had not vanished, but they had been acknowledged, confronted, and transformed into lessons. Lessons that would shape the family they were becoming. Rita leaned against her father, feeling a sense of belonging she had never known before. Benjamin placed his hand on hers, a quiet promise of protection and guidance. And Barbara, standing nearby, knew that her daughter's future was no longer defined by what had been lost, but by what they were building together. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a soft, golden glow across the water, the Aldridge family realized something profound. The past may have shaped them, but it did not define them. Together, they were stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever came next. And in that moment, under the vast Florida sky, they understood that the true measure of wealth was not in power, property, or prestige, but in trust, love, and the courage to face life's challenges as one. The city hummed below, alive with possibilities. And for Benjamin, Barbara, and Rita, a new dawn had begun, one filled with hope, healing, and the promise of a future forged by honesty, resilience, and family. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, share, and subscribe to Boundless Echoes for more interesting stories. We deeply appreciate your support. Comment where you are watching from so we can give you a shout out. See you in our next video.